Good evening, light warriors. Pure Bliss here, hoping to share with you some bliss today. I'm out here at Garden of the Gods, about to watch the sun go down. It's pretty awesome. Here, you can kind of see the kissing camels back there. Panorama view. Look at that. Yeah, I'm definitely enjoying myself out here today. Came out here for just a little bit of meditation. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of emptiness. And it's something that I've definitely struggled with on my personal journey to understand better. And I recently, this past weekend, went to a workshop, meditation workshop at the Kadampa Meditation Center up in Denver, and it was wonderful. Kadam Lucy James, she was there leading us through beautiful meditations in honor of Buddha, female Buddha, the Buddha Tara. She's a very powerful divine feminine energy, and so she talked a lot about the idea of emptiness, and it helped me a lot to understand a little bit more. So I'd like to share with you an exercise she did with us that really helped break it down in my head. So what she did is she posed a question, and she said, "Where is my body?" And she said, "Can you point to it?" And everyone kind of thought about it for a second, and she's like, "You might point to my hand, and this hand up here is it's not my body." Or you might point to my face and say, "Well, that's not my body either." You might point to the torso or the skin or anything that you can tangibly see, but none of those things are actually the body. And through this exercise, you start to see that we are truly just a pile of things that are not the body. And you can do this exercise with anything, anything that you see normally in your everyday life. And you begin to realize that a whole is not a sum of its parts. That these two things are not interchangeable. They're very interdependent. They're not dependent of each other. And so it's interesting because she also was talking a lot about how the true nature of the mind is emptiness. It's a quote directly from the Buddha, if I'm not mistaken. He says that the true reality is in our mind, and that this world we see around us, our everyday, ordinary objects in our life, the solid, objective forms that we see, they are only forms because we give them these labels. And we've all decided that this right here is a hand, and we've given it a name, and so that we all agree on it and that we can communicate. But when you start to search for things with wisdom, as she says, you begin to notice that there is nothing that exists, that the only things that exist are what you make of it in your mind. And so she then challenged us, and I'm going to challenge you, that if everything in this world that we see around us in our ordinary lives is not real, then maybe you can start to use these labels to your advantage. Instead of saying I'm this ignorant, angry person, well, why not using the better label? Why not tell yourself that you're wise and compassionate? And once you plant that seed in your heart, it will definitely grow. And that's how you start to, like we talked about last week, the power of manifestation. You'll start to bring what it is you seek. It'll gravitate towards you. You have to be the change that you want to see in your life. And so this idea of emptiness, it is the true reality of the mind. It is our mind beyond form, beyond labels. And so I challenge you to tap into that true reality today. Maybe find some inner peace, some inner bliss, finding the space in between what we normally see. And it is a challenge. It truly is. So there's a lot that goes into it. It reminds me of something I learned in physics. I remember studying an experiment it was a thought experiment that Albert Einstein had come up with a few of his colleagues. It's called the EPR experiment. I know that E stands for Einstein, and I can't remember his colleagues' names, but he basically had this idea that if you took a particle, or a photon, and you split it in half into particle A and particle B, and the particle A moves away in a direction, that particle B will move in an opposite direction at the same time, almost instantaneously. And so with Einstein's thought experiment, he decided that it was a deterministic outcome, that, if that particle A is always going to tell particle B where to go. And so it's this idea of causality, which, Einstein is very famous for, his deterministic views. But I found, when I was researching this, I found that they actually conducted the experiment, and I believe it was the late 80s, early 90s. One of the Ivy League schools had actually conducted the EPR experiment, and they found that he was wrong, that particle A, when it moves in a direction, it tells particle B where to go, but it's instantaneous. There's no way that there's time for particle A to tell particle B where to go, because it happens within nanoseconds. It's almost as if it doesn't take much time at all for any communication to be observed between the two particles. And they observed this over, if particle A and particle B were miles apart, they would move in almost instantaneously in the same directly opposite directions. And so this tells us that it is not deterministic, that there was no communication between A and B that couldn't have been within a nanosecond. That's faster than the speed of light. And so it just makes me think that we live in a world that's not as deterministic as some might think. That, there is this oneness, there's this idea of non-separation, that, particle A is particle B, that there is no space and time that separate the two objects. And so, we've been seeing a lot of leaps and bounds, quantum leaps and bounds in physics with this idea. And that's another thing, is I'm so fascinated by how intertwined, Buddhism and quantum mechanics are. And I don't call myself a Buddhist, but I am very intrigued by Buddhism and many other religions, and I find it fascinating how they can relate to each other in so many ways. So those are my thoughts for the day. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask, or answers. I appreciate those too. And thank you for being here with me today out in nature. You guys are awesome, and I believe that you guys are so powerful. I hope that you start to realize that too. So I'm going to be posting another video shortly, a guided meditation. I hope you come back to join me. Namaste.